mom. No matter if you are a mom to living children or if you're a mom to children that are already in heaven, it doesn't matter. You are still very much a mom, and nobody can ever take that away from you. And so today's inspiring story that I want to share with you is one that if you've read my blog, if you've followed me at all, you know that this story is one that's touched my heart in just the most insurmountable way. And it's one that I really, truly still cling to today. And that's the story of Hannah. It's in 1 Samuel. So with Hannah, she wanted to have a baby so badly. She yearned for it. And meanwhile, her husband had another wife, and that wife was very, very fertile. She was very prosperous, had many children, and would constantly rub that in Hannah's face. Look at me, look what I can do. How come you can't have children? Oh, you must be really sad that you don't have children. I don't know if that's what she said, but according to the Bible, it does make it sound as if she really did take pleasure in giving Hannah a hard time about this. So you can imagine if you yourself have gone through infertility issues or you've had miscarriage, anything of that nature, how hard that is when you see somebody else that just thinks about getting pregnant, they get pregnant, it happens for them. And you're left there thinking, gosh, I really want to be happy for them. I really want to be happy for them. I know that I should, but I just, for some reason, can't. I can't let that go, that I can't have that. And I think about that that's probably what Hannah felt like too. I think that she probably did love those other children. I think she probably thought of them as her own. However, I just think that it was probably hard for her to be happy because she couldn't biologically have her own. And her husband would constantly say to her, as husbands do, well, aren't I enough? And it was said that he even gave Hannah extra portions of the sacrifice, trying to make up for that. See, he really loved Hannah. And to him, it didn't matter that she didn't have children. And back in those days, he could have easily left her. He could have completely dissolved that marriage just on the fact that she could not give him children. That's just the way that it was. But he wasn't going to do that. He was going to stick with Hannah. He loved her. But he couldn't understand why that wasn't enough for Hannah. It was enough for him. Why wasn't that enough for Hannah? Well, because she had a desire placed on her heart to be a mother. And once we receive that desire, sometimes we'll feel like we can stop at nothing to get that. So in Hannah's case, she turned to God. She turned to God in a massive way. And she went to the temple and she prayed. And she prayed and she prayed and she prayed. And she prayed so hard for this child that she actually got mistaken for being drunk because they had never seen anybody pray the way that Hannah had before. Her lips were moving, her eyes were closed, but no sound was coming out. And when she was approached about it, her response was, I'm pouring my soul out to the Lord. So she didn't need to pray out loud. It was heart to heart talking to the Lord. And she had promised the Lord in that prayer that if she was to get a child, that she would give that child back to him. And she did conceive. The Lord came through for her. He answered that prayer for her. She came to be pregnant and she came to have a beautiful son that she named Samuel. Now, she raised this child until he was 3 years old. And then at 3 years old, when he was old enough to be weaned and to go, not to be so dependent upon her, she gave him back to live at the church, to be a servant of the Lord for the rest of his days. She gave him back. I cannot imagine, because I know with my experience, I was pregnant. Oh, I've had 3 miscarriages, first of all, but my third one was the most detrimental to me because I was 4 months pregnant when it happened. I had to go on to have the child taken from me. We had him cremated. It was a whole horrific deal. But I know that pain of that you want that child so badly. So when I got pregnant again after baby Jay with my son Ephraim, who's my youngest, I cannot imagine loving him, taking care of him, getting up at night, every night with him, losing sleep, the cuddles, everything, and then to just at 3 years old say, okay, here you go. You're going to go be with the Lord now. I can't imagine that. And I'm glad that we don't have to do that. But in Hannah's case, it wasn't even about all that, because see, she understood something that I think will help everyone that's going through this situation. It helped me when I was going through it, is that Hannah understood that those children, that child of hers, was not hers to begin with. That child was God's. It was a gift to her. And I think that that's something that we all need to realize, that our children aren't ours. They're not our property. They're the Lord's. The Lord entrusts us to take care of them and to raise them upright. They are gifts from Him. So sometimes that gift has to go back to God, even though we don't want it to. It has to go back to Him. We don't know the reasons. We're not meant to know the reasons, but for whatever reason, that child is placed in our lives to teach us something, to form our hearts, to create desires, but also to draw us closer to the Lord. And then He will come through and take care of us in the end, just like He did for Hannah. So she didn't lose track of Samuel. She still went there and visited him. I'm sure that they had a great relationship. She did go on to have other children, and those children were hers to keep. So it helps me to think about that. Like in my situation with my son, Jay, that we lost, it helps me to think that, I did have the opportunity to have him inside of me. I did have the opportunity to love him. I was given a huge opportunity to change my perspective on things, to appreciate my children that I already had, to appreciate the child that was coming to me, but also to really respect other women and what they're going through. Because I think a lot of times as women, when we're going through a miscarriage or a child loss, people don't know what to say to us. And sometimes with miscarriage, at least in my experience, I've had people say to me, oh, I'm sorry about that, but you can always try again. Well, that's not the point. The point isn't that we can try again. The point is that there was a life inside of us that is no longer inside of us. That's a loss. And we're still a mother. We're a mother from the time of conception. So that love and that bond for that child is immediate. And I found that myself, I probably was in that category myself, where that empathy for somebody else that was going through it before it happened to me was I didn't really know how to handle that, how to react to it. I've since realized that, I went through an experience, but this experience changed me. God has used me for this experience so that I can help others. But none of that would have been possible if I hadn't really resonated with the story of Hannah, because she taught me to always remember and to always know that our children are not ours. They are gifts from God. And we should be grateful for them, and we are grateful for them. But we also need to respect His timing. And just like Hannah, it wasn't her timing when she wanted one so desperately, and her sister wife was having all of these babies. It was not Hannah's time, but when it was time, her time was very, very special. It was very extremely important to teach other people. It was also very extremely important that she was able to give that child back to the Lord so that He may serve Him and serve a huge purpose in God's major, major plan. If Hannah had gotten pregnant years before when she wanted to, who knows if that would have gone on the same path as it did. That's the point of it, is that the Lord does have a reason for things, even though we don't know what it is, and it hurts to not know what it is. But I just want to give each and every one of you that are struggling or that are going through anything of these issues with pregnancy loss, infertility, to turn to your Bibles and look at a lot of the women's stories, because it's a recurring theme in the Bible. Infertility, it's recurring. A lot of women have gone through it, which leads me to believe that that is part of God's plan on some level. Again, we don't know what it is, but it's It's part of his plan. So again, we've got to walk in that faith with him. We've got to trust him that he knows what's best for us. But we also just have to understand that as we lose those children and they go back to be with the Lord, he needs them. They've served his purpose. They've served their purpose, which is another thing that I think is really hard for the mom brain to wrap around. Because in our mind, we're thinking, how? How did they serve their purpose? But in God's mind, they did. In God's plan, they did. They served their purpose already, and he took them back with them. So that should give us some sort of comfort to know that that child has fulfilled his obligation in the story of the Lord and the story of the Lord's plan. It's already fulfilled. Our plan is not fulfilled yet. So we have to keep going. We have to trust in him. Now, does that take away the grieving and the loss? Absolutely not. I grieved for a very long time after my child loss. I still grieve. Every April, every October, anytime something happens, I see a blue jay, I am constantly reminded of that. But it has helped me to get through that, to really try to understand that that child had fulfilled its purpose in the world. And that now it's time for me to fulfill mine. And just trust in the Lord and trust that his timing is right. And when it's supposed to be right, it is right. And I know I've been talking a lot about timing lately, but I think that that's just something that I know I personally have a very hard time with. But talking to a lot of people, it's something extremely common where a lot of us just have a hard time understanding that timing and having faith in the Lord that his timing is the perfect time. And it is. And that's part of faith. It's part of faith, is just really putting it in it and believing it. But I just really wanted to encourage you out there with Hannah's story that anything is possible with God. And things that we seem that we can't do here, that things that just aren't working out for us, it's impossible for us to do, but it's very, very possible for God. And we just need to pray. Pray. And just wait for him to answer us, because he will answer us. And it may not be in the way that we want it to, but it will be answered. Like a good friend of mine who struggled for infertility for years and ended up adopting 2 children. That is how her family was formed. That is how she's been fulfilled. I have a dear, sweet cousin who has epilepsy and has to take all of these medications. Never thought she would ever be able to have a baby. She never thought she'd be a mom. Always wanted to be a mom. Never could meet the right man. It just, nothing was ever lining up for her. And she ended up getting 2 foster children on an emergency basis, where she was one of the only ones that they were able to contact to come and take these children. And she's been the most amazing mom to them for the last 8 years. So no matter what way it's going to happen in God's way, and it's going to be perfect for your life. You just have to be patient and just trust in him. And when in doubt, go to your Bible, read about Hannah, read about Sarah. There are so many stories that can really help you and help you to understand. And I hope that maybe I've helped to encourage you a bit today. Until next time, God bless you. Have a great day.